here we go, Q&A time. But first, check this out. It is a special day. It is a finished guitar day. Okay, and that's just me playing with my fleshy fingertips. Should probably get a pick out. Let's get a pick. I'm not going to mess around with this too much. We'll get to the Q's and the A's. But first, this is not a pick I normally use. You can hear how that projects. So this is guitar number 106 for David in California. So this is ready to be shipped out. With the exception of, I do have to add a pick guard. I haven't done that yet, which is why I'm a little scared of using this pick right now. But I wanted you guys to hear this and to see it, and I have a video coming out that where I just go over, I kind of pour over this entire guitar, talking about all the features, and in a way that would be interesting to builders and luthiers. So there's a lot to be gained from that and to be learned. But hey, I could screw around with this guitar all day, but I'm not going to. Let's put it away. Let's get to work. And we'll start with the private members forum. That's the Discord. And let's see, the question of the week, I literally got 0 answers for the question of the week. Which is okay, you know, the Discord's kind of new, so we're all getting used to it. I'm still trying to get people who haven't signed up for the Discord yet onto the Discord. If you've bought an online course from me or the hands-on workshop, you have access to this Discord. You just got to follow the invite link that I emailed you. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. I'm going to read the question of the week that I put in the members forum to you guys anyway, and you guys on YouTube perhaps can answer this going forward, because I don't have any responses to give you right now. So the question of the week is, how much time do you spend in the shop, and how much would you spend if you had no other obligations? And so I'll answer this for myself, and this changes all the time. You know, I'm a solo business owner. I can do whatever I want in theory, and so my schedule, there's sort of different seasons in life to this business thing, and currently with having 2 small children at home, what I'm doing is I'm working Monday through Thursday, and I will work long crazy hours on those days. In fact, sometimes I will sleep at the shop just so that I can get 2 very full days, like say 15 hours of work in. And that justifies, for myself, that justifies me not coming in on Friday, right? So that's the way that I cheat the 5-day work week. I always prefer, when I get into the shop, I'd rather do a very, very long day than do a little bit every single day. There's something about getting into the flow and being able to do deep, focused work that can better be achieved over the course of, say, a 10 to 15 hour day. Because if you minimize the distractions, you can really sink into the work, and I prefer that for sure. It takes me a while to kind of get the gears turning when I first show up at the shop. So those long days are helpful. Anyway, that's my answer. Oh, how much time would I spend? I didn't answer that part. If I had no other obligations, if I, was completely unleashed here, honestly, I would probably spend about the same amount of time. Because it's a pretty crazy amount of time that I do spend as it is. I have other hobbies and interests, so I'd probably spend the same amount of time that I am spending. Anyway, tell me what you guys do. I'd actually love to hear it. I like doing the question of the week because it's my way of asking you guys questions, and I actually do learn a lot about the guitar making community, what others generally do. I don't get to hang out with other builders too much. I have a couple friends, but not too many. So a lot of this is me in isolation, as we all are when we work in our shops, and you know, I'm communicating through a camera. So I do appreciate learning, just like you guys appreciate learning from me, hopefully. So let's jump back to the Discord now. All right, and see what we got here. Okay, Russ G writes, does anyone have experience with or recommendations for acoustic pickups? I've looked at sound hole pickups, sound hole mics, and saddle pickups. I am now totally confused. I'm not interested in cutting into the side for a preamp, just a quality pickup setup that connects at the end wedge / strap button. Thanks. Okay, Russ. Oh, actually, let me read. We've got some responses here, or at least one response. LC Guitars writes, K&K Pure Mini. He beat me to it. That is what I was going to say. The K&Ks are great. I have very little experience with amplification, with putting, you know, any sort of pickup system on a guitar. So I'm not the best person to ask for this, but I would agree with LC Guitars. The K&K Pure Mini is your best bet. It has 3 transducers that glue to the bridge plate under the saddle and a cable and jack. Quick, easy setup and great sounding. Yeah, when I build an acoustic guitar, I don't install pickups on it. If someone requested a specific thing, I would do it, but that's why I have a lot of knowledge or experience in this. But the K&K Pure Minis are good. LR Bragg's makes great systems. Yeah, and I'm glad he doesn't want to cut into the side and add a preamp. I always think that's just a bad idea. It's great for less expensive guitars, but when you're making a really fine guitar, you don't want to put a whole fat, heavy onboard electronics system on there. But that's all I'll say about that. Alla Lush writes, I got a little bit confused when I see plans for an OM 14 fret guitar. In this plan, only the back seems to have a tapering for a certain radius, but the top is straight on the plan. From the course, I have learned to taper top and back after bending and fitting the sides in the mold with a plane and radius dish. Is this some mistake in the plan? See attachment. Actually, yes, I did look at this, and it's not a mistake in the plan. What they're giving you on this particular plan is they are giving you a contour template that you can cut out for the purpose of pre-shaping the taper on your sides before you bend it. And so the reason why there isn't a radius on there is because the radii are so slight that for the purposes of making a template, rough dimensioning your sides, it doesn't make sense to draw that radius on there or even talk about the radius. The radius happens after the rim set is assembled. And again, it's very slight. So that's why they didn't produce that for you there on the plans. Okay, I'm getting a phone call. I'll be right back. Okay, and we are back. And actually, hours have gone by for me, not for you, obviously. It was instant. But, so my phone started ringing, as you heard, because I forgot to silence it. And then my camera overheated because I had it too close to the window in direct sunlight. So I had to let that cool down. I actually went outside and tended to the chickens because that's just another one of the hobbies that I have, keeping chickens. For you guys who have been here to the workshop for some of the courses, you've seen my coop out back. I like to keep chickens and collect fresh eggs on the reg. So it's just kind of a fun hobby for me. I was answering Richie's question on his parlor plans that he has. And so those two, the reason they don't recommend radii on a lot of plans is because, well, let me say it this way. a lot of plans say slight arch for the top and the back, and that confuses a lot of new builders, and maybe not even new builders. It just confuses people when they first run into that, because why isn't the radius mentioned? It's simply suggested that you come up with your own radius, and actually that is kind of what they're saying, because different builders will have different sets of radius dishes, and the plans are not suggesting that you go out and you buy a new radius dish or make a new radius dish to build a very specific slight arch into your top or the back. The amount of radius that you use on the top and the back, as long as it's a reasonable radius that luthiers use, there's many different radii, but the one that you pick doesn't matter that much. Just have a radius. Don't glue your top or your back dead flat. I've talked about this many times on Q&As. Don't glue your plates flat. You need to have some type of radius, whether it's a really subtle radius like a 40 foot or a fairly extreme radius like a 15 or a 12. That would be for your back plate, not for your top. You need to have some kind of radius. Someone else in the forum suggested 25 for the top and 15 for the back. Yeah, that's great. You could also do 40 for the top, 30 for the top. You could do 12 for the back, 15 for the back, 20 for the back. There's lots of options, and even if you go on suppliers of radius dishes, you can see what those suppliers recommend and just go with that. The main point being that you don't have to overthink which radius you use for the top and the back, but you do have to have a radius. One other thing I want to address is you were confusing and conflating the terms taper and radius. The back on those plans did not have a radius implied there. They were simply showing you the taper of the back, and that's actually different. Seems like the same thing, but it's different. So the taper is just the tilt from the end block to the neck block. The end block is the end block side of the sound box is deeper than the neck block side, and so the way that that depth occurs is the back plate is tilted in such a way to give us that taper. Okay, so that's different from the radius. I hope that makes sense. And actually, if I show you on a guitar, it might make a little bit of sense. So this plate right here has a certain radius, and the back plate has a certain radius. The top and the back have different radii, but the back plate is tilted like this towards the neck block. All right, that's all I'm going to say about that. Let's jump to another question. Sometimes this show devolves into me just talking and explaining radii for an hour, so I want to avoid that. It really is one of the most common questions. I'm not picking on Richie by saying that. I'm actually mentioning it because it's that important. It's that often mentioned of a question that it's worth spending time on. But I have spent time on it here and in other episodes as well. So you can check back on those other episodes to hear a more detailed explanation of the radius if you're still confused with that, Richie. Okay, let's jump back into the Discord here. And Doc Joe wants to talk about the Elevate variable mortise and tenon jig that he got. Doc Joe writes, "Hello, I wanted to just give you all my insight into this jig I purchased from Elevate Lutherie to route the tenon and mortise for acoustic guitars. This task has always seemed anxiety-provoking, but this jig is awesome. There are some great videos on YouTube about this. This can be used, as I have done so here, with a router table, or it can be used with a plunge router." Oh, that's interesting. I wasn't expecting that for you to be able to use that with a router table. That's really interesting, actually. But I'm going to keep reading. We'll come back to that. He writes, "You can buy the router stock, or you can get some custom additions. I bought my stock, but made some changes. For lining up the neck, it comes with one hole and a cone-shaped centering pin to help locate the center of the neck at one point. You can, however, ask to have a second hole made in line with the first as a second locating pin. These center the neck at the truss rod channel. For me, I bought it before I realized that a second hole would be quite helpful. I do have a metal lathe and mill at home and was able to mill another locating hole and fabricate locating pins to fit my StewMac truss rod width. With 2 locating pins locating my center, all I need to do to set up the route for the neck was to get the angle of the neck. There's a good extensive video online on how to use this jig, but I will say it made this job go quite well. And he's got some nice pictures here, including showing it being used on a router table, which I find interesting. So I'm glad that Joe mentioned this, because I had heard of this jig. I'm very familiar with Elevate. In fact, I know the owner, Chris, and he's a great guy. And, you know, Elevate is a small company that produces just a small handful of very high quality tools rather than a wide, huge variety of sort of lower quality tools. So it's a very interesting company. And I was wondering about this because this is a less expensive way of handling the mortise and tenon than what I use, which is the luthier tool neck angle jig. I paid really good money for that, but it is an absolutely professional piece of equipment, and that's why I spent over $1,000 for this jig. And so I by no means want to explore outside of that jig right now, because that jig really solves all the problems I've ever had with the mortise and tenon, and it does it in a way that's very repeatable and very quick and easy to use. So anyway, with all that said, though, I know a lot of people don't want to put that kind of money into a jig for just one job during their guitar build. So I get asked a lot, what do you recommend that's a little more approachable? And this sounds like Joe is giving a good recommendation here for the Elevate tool, which I had been on my radar, but I hadn't gotten my hands on one myself. So that's good to know. Good to know that someone likes it. So, and it sounds like it solves the problems he was having. And yeah, I find that any good system for routing the mortise and tenon involves locating it into the truss rod slot for accuracy, rather than sort of freehand locating the neck yourself. And so I'm glad he installed that second pin there. For me, if I were to get this, that would be, for sure, I would have ordered that from the company. So I do think that's the way to go. But anyway, he's got some pictures here, so I'll include those. And yeah, if you're interested, you can ask Joe about it in the forum, or just, you know, go check out the jig online. Let's see, we got another question here somewhere. Okay, give me 1 second. All right, let's do another one from Doc Joe here. Actually, he has a lot of updates on his build here, so let's go through this, because I think he's got some good insights here we can share. Doc Joe writes, okay, contrary to what is typically recommended, I am being a bit ambitious with this build. I will say that this is not my first guitar build, having built many electric guitars and having built a StewMac acoustic kit. So with this build, I am building on the knowledge I gained from that acoustic build. I'm much further in this build, but would like to share my progress on this, my first scratch build. I got a torrefied spruce top and Indian rosewood back and sides. I did inlay the Rosette with Abalone. I did learn some valuable lessons from this because there are some imperfections and mistakes that I made. Oh, as a side note, the rods for my Go Bar deck were purchased from Home Depot. They are fiberglass rods with a slightly tapered tip on one end and reflective tape on the shaft, used as driveway markers. Yes, so yeah, I use the Go Bars that StewMac sells, but I've always been aware of that you could literally just buy these fiberglass, he calls them driveway markers, from Home Depot. So that's a really good tip right there for people trying to do things on the cheap. And so I'm glad he mentioned that. I've actually seen someone, so he's talking about cutting down these very, very tall driveway markers, but I have seen someone use them full length and literally use their own ceiling of the shop as their Go Bar deck ceiling. So that's kind of crazy. I'm not recommending that, but I just thought it was interesting and I wanted to mention it. So getting back to what he was saying, it was something like 20 rods for about $20. Yeah, that's great. Can't beat that. Also, you can get the little white tips to fit the ends at the shelving section at a very cheap price as well. Oh, that's cool. That's a great tip. And then he's got some pictures here. And wow, this looks really nice, really clean work. Especially this rosette here. That looks perfect. Well executed. And I've got that up on the screen so you can see it. That is a beautiful rosette. Nice abalone there. And, you know, when I look at a rosette, so when a normal person looks at a rosette, they're just transfixed by the grain of the wood or the shimmering of the pearl or something like that. But I always look at the edges, as I think most woodworkers are trained to do. And I'm looking for tear out and little gaps and maybe attempts at filling things. And I don't see any of that right here. You know, maybe he hit it well, but it actually just looks like it's a very well executed rosette. So I want to give you kudos for that, Joe. And let's go on to his next update on his build. He writes, the next pictures are hand bending the sides with the bending iron, then gluing in the heel and tail blocks, then installing the kerfing. I am using a cream colored binding for this build and didn't have a cream colored end wedge, so I made a chevron patterned wedge with the cream colored binding on both sides. Then also glued in the bracing. Okay, now I've got those pictures as well. Very nice. And he writes, this is the glue up of the back to the sides using the go-bar deck. The second picture is gluing the soundboard. I had spool clamps from my first acoustic build, so I used those instead of using the go-bar deck and a bunch of cauls. I also did not want to risk one of the rods slipping and accidentally denting the soundboard. Yes, there are many ways to glue up the plates. If you have a go-bar deck, it's a great idea to just use that go-bar deck to glue your top and your back to the rim set. But spool clamps, which are very common in the classical building world, a little less common in the steel string building world. Although I think that's changing. Stu Mack, I think, has a lot to do with the fact that a lot of steel string builders now use spool clamps. Personally, I glue up my top and back plate in the radius dish using just a huge amount of cam clamps. I love cam clamps. I've got like 70 or 80 cam clamps behind me on the shelf over here. So it takes a lot of cam clamps to do that, so it's not for everyone. Spool clamps are a lot cheaper, plus you can just make them yourself very easily. All right, thank you, Joe. Oh, he's got one more update. Well, we'll do this as well. Doc Joe writes, so the back and soundboard have been glued and the excess routed off using a flush trim router bit and the binding jig I got off eBay, similar to the Stu Mack binding jig. Okay. After trimming off this excess flush and then making sure the sides were flat, the next step was to route the channel for the binding and then another pass with the purfling, which in this case is thin purfling strips sandwiching a Teflon placeholder strip the width of my abalone strips. Once these two routing jobs were done, then I glued on the binding. Here, I'll stop there for a second to sit on for just a moment, what he was talking about there, because I don't want that to just slip right past you. This is how you install mother of pearl or abalone purfling along with a binding scheme. Is you put in your binding first with, instead of, normally, if you're just doing like fiber strips or something else for purfling, you would put your binding and your purfling on together at the same time you glue those. But if you're doing shell, you can't glue them with tight bond. Plus, you're breaking them down into very small bits that you have to assemble. So what you have to do is you have to actually install a Teflon strip in place of your abalone or mother of pearl purfling. So Teflon is this material that resists glue. It does not stick down. So we can sandwich that Teflon strip in there. It obviously has to be the exact same size of your purfling, right? Because your purfling is going to replace that. And then that Teflon strip, it's always such a enjoyable moment of the build, I find. After you've glued that up and removed all the tape, you just peel that thing off like a piece of licorice. It just kind of slides right out of there. It's really nice and slick. And then you go about the very long process of assembling your tiny little bits of shell all the way around. It's really fun, actually. It's very tedious, but it's one of those jobs that you can just put on some music and sit there and just really sink into it. I mean, you could hours just go by and you're shaping these tiny little pieces of shell. I love doing it, I really do. So, getting back to what he was saying, once these two routing jobs were done, then I glued on the binding. Then I carefully installed the thin purfling strips and Teflon placeholder strip. I already said that. Once this was done, the purfling was glued in place with super thin CA glue. After the glue cured, I removed the Teflon strip, revealing the channel for the abalone strips. Lastly was the installation of the abalone strips using a jeweler's hammer, following it up with flathead screwdriver to help seat the abalone in place, and then at regular intervals using the same super thin CA glue to glue the inlay in place. The last step, once this was done, was to go ahead and sand the areas flat. I'm really happy with how this part of the guitar build has gone. And he's got some great pictures there as well. And once again, very clean work. It's impressive. It really is. All right. Way to go, Doc Joe. Let's see what else we got on here. And I am running out of time a little bit, so we'll see where I get. Actually, I think I might be out of time. I wanted to do more here, but there is more, and we'll get it in the next Q&A. But you know, we got some good things done here. So I appreciate you all. I'm thankful that you watch this and you find something interesting about it, and all the feedback that I get through the comments is very helpful for me, and also it provides fodder for new Q&As, because a lot of that feedback is more questions. So let's keep that coming, guys. Really appreciate that. I appreciate you, and I'll see you guys in the next one, and bye for now. See ya. If you learned something here, please give this video a like and subscribe so you can be notified when I release a new DIY guitar making video. And if you want to really learn more, take one of my structured online courses at ericschaferguitars.com or register for a hands-on guitar building workshop here with me in Burnville, Pennsylvania.